So, John, I think about my friends, and they're very smart guys and girls. And some of them believe in God very enthusiastically, and some of them believe there is no God. And there's no way to distinguish them between their scientific background, their philosophical expertise, on all sides. And so I look at this, and what conclusion can I come to other than the universe is religiously ambiguous?
It's open to multiple interpretations. That's one way of taking the idea that the universe is religiously ambiguous. It's not the only way. That term is itself ambiguous. It could be that you think that, some aspects of the universe count in favor of, well, of what? That's another way in which we've got an ambiguity. Are we talking here about the evidence for God, the traditional theistic God, or the more general idea of an ultimate divine reality of some kind? Okay, I think at the one level, the universe isn't ambiguous, at the level of the personal God. At the other level, at the level of the more general divine, I think it is ambiguous at that level. But as I was saying, some people will say that some things in the universe count for God. Let's think about the personal God first. And others count against. Some will instead say that the whole of our experience, all of the facts that are known to us about the universe, can be interpreted one way or another way. In any case, what is common to all of these ideas is that there's no clear, decisive indication of the truth of the matter as to whether there is a God or there isn't. And so you get the kinds of people you were talking about. There's some people who believe and others who don't. It looks like it's possible to be reasonable in holding either position.
One example is the so-called fine-tuning of the universe, where every constant of physics seems to be just right within a certain boundary range for the existence of any organization of matter, and particularly resulting in the evolution of human consciousness. And there are two radically different ways. I mean, it certainly looks like it's designed, and it can be designed from an intent point of view, which would indicate some supernatural entity, not necessarily a personal being, but suggesting that. And the other is a multiple universe,
right?
Where if everything exists, then what we would have would be one of the ways that reality can be. And if reality can be every way, then this is one way. And if we weren't here because we evolved, we wouldn't ask the question. So it's a self-consistent argument. So those are two.
Yeah, and the theist is very happy to hear about such results. And the theist, with her ever-expanding interpretation, taking in new information and assimilating it to her own framework of ideas, is going to say, well, look, I know who did that. Yeah, sure. Those constants were very precisely defined by my God, the personal creator of the universe. But somebody who's not trying to interpret everything in theistic terms is going to say, well, hold on, there are other ways of understanding this. And precisely the fact that there are other ways of understanding this, which reasonable people can accept, might seem to point in the direction of what you call the religious ambiguity of the universe. But I think, myself, that the ambiguity of the universe at the level of theism is in fact a reason to not believe in God. I think ambiguity itself is evidence against the existence of God. If you go to that next level, you can see that that itself is a fact about the universe, and to my mind it counts against the existence of a personal God. And so the personal God, in my view, does not exist, and ambiguity is itself evidence.
Why? Why is that? I like ambiguity. Ambiguity gives some reality, gives some tension. If everything was so obvious one way or the other, I think life wouldn't be as interesting. We wouldn't have the opportunity to explore it, to think, and to fight, and to argue, and to dispute with each other.
Oh, there are lots of ways in which the world could allow for those possibilities, such that God is still known to people who wish to know God. And the reason that I think ambiguity counts against the existence of God is that it makes possible non-belief in God, a non-resistant non-belief, which I've developed into an argument that's called the Hiddenness Argument. And so that Hiddenness Argument, to my mind, shows that there is no God. And so, although initially when you look at the world, you see its ambiguity and you see reasonable people on both sides, that very fact can itself be taken as evidence that disambiguates the situation, at least at the level of whether there is a personal God or no.
So why do I like ambiguity? I like ambiguity. I'm not saying I don't like it. I like it.
Do you like this particular sort of ambiguity? The fact that there are all these different sorts of evidence, some seeming to point in the direction of God and others not?
I struggle because I'd like to know an answer, but at the end of the day, I think that the struggle of wanting to know an answer and thinking about these things is a very useful one, and it's a very probative one, and it's a very self-developing one. If it were obvious from childhood growing up that there was certainty one way or the other, I'm not sure I would be
but that depends,
as rich as a character as
that depends on putting the focus entirely on this question about theism. Even if that were cleared up, there'd be just ever so many other interesting questions to explore. In fact, we might be in a better position to discover, at least eventually, answers to them.
So you look upon the universe as religiously ambiguous in some big sense.
At the level
of
the
that counts
ultimate,
against a personal theistic God. It's ambiguous in the big sense of religion.
Yes. When you're thinking about a personal God, you're thinking about a being who's, among other things, loving. And so you get the result that such a being would allow finite persons who are loved by it to believe in its existence. And that's why ambiguity at that level is a problem. At the higher level, where you're thinking about the ultimate, however it should be understood, you don't get those particular results. And in fact, precisely because it's such a broad idea, there is much, much more scope for skepticism there and for continuing religious ambiguity.
And you like that?
I think it's very interesting because it allows me to develop a new understanding of skeptical religion. It's pushed me in that direction in a way that I would not have been pushed otherwise. Religious ambiguity, or my reflection on religious ambiguity, at least at the level of theism, leads me in the direction of a new argument against the existence of God, which I call the Hiddenness Argument. This argument says that God wouldn't tolerate religious ambiguity because it makes possible a kind of non-belief in God that prevents people from being in a position to participate in any kind of relationship with God of the sort that a perfectly loving God would desire. And so, in this way, religious ambiguity can itself be disambiguating evidence by making possible this hiddenness argument against the existence of God.